Tony D and Little Joan with a screenwriter's take on the Banshees of Inisherin, which I finally saw on HBO Max. So we're going to get into it. We're going to break down the movie, talk about whether or not it's something you should see. Kind of depends on what you're into. I think it's pretty good. But let's break it down. I'll do the non-spoiler review and then a spoiler review. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Thanks for checking out my books. Links in the description. Comedy horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys. Books 1 through 10. Available at Amazon.com. Don't forget Kindle Unlimited is free. Okay. So the non-spoiler review. It's definitely an unusual movie. Definitely Oscar bait. Some great performances here. A very unusual plot. Sort of a slice of life with a lot of weird twists. I did not know how this movie was going to end, which I really enjoyed. Feels a little bit like a play in the way it's sort of structured. The basic premise is Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell are friends. And they live on an island off the coast of Ireland during the Irish Civil War. And they've been friends forever. And it's a very small community. So, and maybe some people would have trouble relating to this movie. I think people in more rural climes would relate to it, being from a small town. I don't know if you'd consider me being from a small town. I live in a small town now. I mean, comparatively, there's only 1,900 people in here. But it's not like it was then. When you lived in a small village, you know, before the age of internet, did they have phones? They didn't seem to have phones. Although I'm sure they may have had a phone. They had phonographs. So I think they probably were on the verge of phones. They were still using lanterns. They were still using mail. But they didn't have the internet or TV or anything like that. So people were very close. So when you talk about a friendship that's been ongoing for decades, and that's the crux of this entire movie, you know, it may not totally resonate with a modern audience in that way. But at the same time, friendship is kind of universal. So, again, the basic plot is Brendan Gleeson has decided not to be friends any longer with Colin Farrell. He just basically stops being his friend and eventually tells him, which is kind of the annoying part. He eventually tells him, listen, I just can't be around you anymore. You're boring. Talking to you is a waste of time, basically. And I'm just going to concentrate on my music. And it mostly focuses on Colin Farrell trying to process this. And he kind of almost can't. He kind of really can't process it. And I kind of can't blame his character. Because when you've been friends with somebody for most of your life, and they just suddenly say, no more, it's kind of a shock to the system. What happens to Colin Farrell's character in the movie is kind of sad and grueling. And the ending isn't as satisfying as I would like it. I like very satisfying endings. But the concept in the movie itself, I kind of did enjoy the ride. Because I kind of didn't know where it was going. In the end, it kind of just ends. Without really, you know, giving you, I don't know, a conclusion. Not really. There's kind of a conclusion, but not really. And that's sort of the point. And part of it is the metaphor. The Irish Civil War is not only going on while the movie's happening. The people of the island are close enough to the mainland to see it. Like, they see explosions and hear shooting and stuff, which is kind of interesting. Because at one point, one of the other characters moves back to the mainland, and then, you know, thinks it's just about over. So would I recommend it? Phew. Well, it's definitely a movie for people who love movies, who are more into, like, if you go to art house movies, I think you would like this movie. If you don't, if you're more of a mainstream connoisseur of movies, let's say, I'm not sure you would totally like this. It's also a bit sad, which I wanted it to be funnier. I kind of wanted the comedy version of this. I think the comedy version of this would have been definitely would have been more fun. Although part of it, I'm not sure how you would make the comedy work, and I'm not sure what you would do for an ending if this was a comedy. So I guess you'd have to call this a drama, but it very much feels like a play, and it very much ends like a play. And most of the work, most of the heavy lifting is done by Colin Farrell and the actress playing his sister. Oh God, I can't. Kerry Condon, I think that's her. Brendan Gleeson is in it, and is one of the main characters, but it's really a three-person movie. It's Colin Farrell, Kerry Condon, and Brendan Gleeson. The three of them. They're dynamic. She plays Siobhan, Colin Farrell's character's brother, and really it's kind of about how they're smarter than him in a lot of ways, but not. And that's about all I can say without giving too much away. It's very complex, I think, and very nuanced. I liked it. I think movie, again, art. If you're into art house movies, if you want to see a different kind of movie, a different kind of drama, I think you'll like it. If you're more of a mainstream person, you know, you want something basic, this is not a meat and potatoes movie. This is got a lot of interesting nuances in the performance. So that's about all I can say. Would I recommend the movie? Yeah. In general, I would recommend it. I would even recommend it to a mainstreamer just to say, yeah, this is a pretty good movie. This is definitely Oscar bait. I think the plan probably is to nominate this for a lot of Oscars. It probably deserves an Oscar or two. Definitely for the acting. The acting's very good, especially from Colin Farrell. Colin Farrell is just, you know, great. And Kerry Condon, too. She deserves... would you call her supporting in this? I guess she would be a supporting actress. Really, it's Colin Farrell as the main character, and Brendan Gleeson and Kerry Condon kind of about just underneath them doing all the supporting. Yeah. And there's great performance by another actor. I'm not sure if that's him, Barry Keoghan. Really, all the actors are really great in this. I mean, they're so believable in their roles. So believable. Everybody's just great, you know, from that perspective. Plot-wise, you got to get past... you have to get past one thing. And you have to accept that that one thing will happen, kind of. Like, that it's not that crazy. So it's a little, that part of it, if you can't get past that, yeah, you'll hate the movie. But I think most people could. It is a movie. You have to have some suspension of disbelief here. And well, I can't say much more without giving away details. So let's get into the non-spoiler review. Non-spoiler review. Okay, first act, it just jumps right in. Doesn't even set up. You know, if this had been a comedy movie, I think the first act would have been the normal dynamic of Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell, and how Brendan Gleeson just can't stand him anymore. And he tries a bunch of things to tolerate it, But in the end, he's just like, that's it. You're not my friend anymore. Instead, what they basically start with that. That basically starts the whole thing. He just doesn't go to the pub with him. And within a few minutes into the movie, he's just like, yeah, we're not friends anymore. Just stay the hell away from me. I'm just going to work on my music, right? And I could, at first, when I first heard that concept, I thought, man, what the hell is going to be his excuse? But as an artist myself, I can understand that, right? So, but you'd think there's got to be some sort of compromise here. Like, my first reaction was, why doesn't Brendan Gleeson just say, listen, I need to spend less time with you, as opposed to cutting him off completely? I mean, he cuts him off and then continues to walk around a very small village, which obviously is going to piss off, his friend. So, that part of it, I had to sort of overcome a little bit. The second act, I think, really starts, and again, spoilers. The spoilers are here. When Brendan Gleeson makes this comment where he vows to shear off one of his fingers if Colin Farrell doesn't leave him alone. And then the second act really begins when he finally does it. And you're just like, holy F, he actually did it. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, that was extreme. But now Colin Farrell's going to leave him alone. And of course, he sort of can't. He sort of can't. And in his character's defense, Brendan Gleeson's character is extremely unreasonable because he's still interacting with him. And the dividing line between don't talk to me anymore, I'll cut off my fingers, and I will interact with you in certain circumstances just isn't clear. So I was waiting for a moment where it was going to be very clear that Brendan Gleeson is, like, mentally ill. And I think he kind of is. And then there's this idea in the movie that Colin Farrell is the nice guy. And I guess what they're trying to do is sort of bring up that question. Is he the nice guy, or is he just a normie who is selfish and wants to eat away at Brendan Gleeson's time so he can't have a life? And it kind of is backed up by his sister's action. His sister can't take living with him basically anymore, and then leaves to go be a librarian on the mainland, right? I think the third act is when Brendan Gleeson cuts off the rest of his fingers. His sister, and then the climax of the movie is his sister leaves, the donkey dies. Oh, that's such a heartbreaking scene. And he's like, I'm gonna burn your damn house down. Which is just like, at this point, at that point, I'm like, yeah, now I'm on his side. It just was bizarre to me that Brendan Gleeson could cut off his own fingers. I mean, it's just crazy. And then he starts with this finger. Or, no, on the left hand. He starts with this finger. Like, why wouldn't you start with this finger if you had to cut off your fingers? But I guess he needed that for violin playing, and then this one, not so much. But then when he cuts off all the other fingers, oh my God. So it was just, and then he's sitting there still interacting with all the music students, and like no one's pointing to him and saying, what the hell happened to your fingers, dude? Like, he has no bandages on and anything. That would be the part of the movie I'm just like, I mean, if this had ended with, I don't know, Colin Farrell's character waking up from a dream, I would have been like, oh, okay, this makes a lot more sense. But, Brendan Gleeson just cutting off his fingers, man. Wow. That's just like crazy. That's crazy town. I think in the end, I found that Colin Farrell's character is kind of the most reasonable one. He, other than the fact he drinks too much and he kind of gets mean when he's a drunk, but you know, he is a nice guy. But it's, I guess the movie is also about how nice people kind of end up doing damage, you know, because as nice as Colin Farrell's character is, he's kind of oblivious, and he blurts out things that he shouldn't blurt out, and that's what causes a lot of the problems. That's what I think kind of drives the suicide of Dominic, and I think it was suicide. I mean, his father's diddling him. I mean, that was like a crazy revelation too. So, and then when Colin doesn't get arrested for burning down Brendan Gleeson's house, you can kind of understand, because in that moment, you know, he's about to go up. The cop is the cop's a great character too. He was a great character. Kudos to that actor. I'm not sure who he is. Man, he was just very sufficiently like routine and evil at the same time, because he was kind of a sadist. Like, he didn't care who was being executed. He was just excited to go to an execution regardless of the side. That was kind of messed up. So the whole movie's kind of messed up. It wasn't as a happy movie as I kind of thought it would be. And when Brendan Gleeson threatened to cut off his own fingers, my first instinct was, oh, this is going to be an idle threat. He's going to keep threatening, and then in one scene he's going to like actually start doing it, and then kind of cut his hand. But in the end, you know, he doesn't lose he cuts off his damn fingers. I mean, that was shocking. It was shocking. But also kind of unrealistic at the same time, I have to admit. But the movie, I think, holds up. Yeah. Because I did not, towards the end, when he threatens to cut off the rest of his fingers, I'm like, no way. No way is this guy that crazy. And then it happens, and you're like, whoa. How is this thing going to end? The other thing, too, is Colin Farrell's character seems to go through so much. I thought he was going to kill himself at the end. And the old lady is very, very much like an old Shakespearean play. You know, you have this old lady just wandering around making pronouncements, seeing the major events of the movie. It's really an odd ending, too, because there's no closure. Much like, I guess, the Irish Civil War. There was not really closure on it, I guess. I think is what the movie makers were trying to say. I'm not sure what time period it is, but man, I guess it would be the early 1900s. I'm guessing. Man, and then the weird sort of ending where Brendan Gleeson thanks Colin Farrell for watching over his dog, despite the fact he just burned down his house. I mean, it's nuts. It makes sense with it. Colin Farrell's character, though, because his character obviously loves animals, and who the hell could hurt a dog? I was really worried he'd hurt his dog at one moment, but he didn't. Thank God. Thank God, doggy. But it's kind of a sad movie, It's kind of sad. It's not totally sad. It's not wringing all the melodrama out of it. I think if they had done that, Brendan Gleeson would have died in the fire, and it would have ended with Colin Farrell like hanging himself. I'm not sure why they ended it the way they did, though. I mean, I wouldn't have gone that melodramatic route. That would have been too much, too sad. But I would like to have seen a funner version of this movie where Colin Farrell just is so boring and he drives everybody crazy, and it just disrupts the town. But they did the dramatic version, which is really good, because you can see how the ripples ripple out from the initial Brendan Gleeson just says, yeah, we can't be friends anymore. And it just ripples out from there. And you see people kind of hurt each other because of that. Because of that event, you see characters hurt each other needlessly. And sometimes, like his sister, Colin Farrell's sister, she doesn't needlessly hurt him. She feels like she has no choice but to move on with her life, which I kind of can't blame her. And you see Dominic too. Dominic's an interesting character. Everybody in this movie is interesting. And it's such low stakes. And that's what you really have to take away from this screenwriter. The low stakes in this. First off, technology, gone. Because of the time period. Very simple characters. And they've all got very simple goals. You know, Brendan Gleeson wants to write great music before he dies. Colin Farrell just wants to have his friend back. Kerry Condon, Siobhan, his sister, I think she just wants a life, you know, a life outside this small village because she's smarter. Although Brendan Gleeson is smart too, so it's not like they're doing the whole girl boss thing. Dominic, he's trying to have a good life, but he's too messed up. The cop, he's just an a-hole doing damage to people. You got the old lady who's just a little bit nuts and sort of knows what's up, you know. So all great characters. All great characters. The bartenders are cool. The guy who's not the bartender who kind of repeats everything he says in that one scene. That was pretty interesting. It feels like everybody's got a role to play here. And that's what is missing with a lot of modern movies. It's just there's just nothing to these characters in your average movie. They should all have these little quirks and interesting things like this in every movie. That's certainly what's missing from, you know, TV shows like The Witcher and Rings of Power and that kind of stuff. This kind of simple life with these characters should have infused those medieval stories, because that's the way life was. It was very simple. You know, Colin Farrell's character is a farmer, essentially. He milks cows, raises livestock. I'm not sure what Brendan Gleeson's job was. I guess he played music in the town, and I guess he made money that way. I'm not sure. Although he had kind of a farmhouse too. Maybe he was retired by that point. You know, yeah, I mean, the cop had a job, obviously. Other people had jobs. But, yeah, I guess everybody's a farmer still at this level. Everybody's in an agrarian society. So, it was, I mean, very subtle, nuanced performances from everyone. And, yeah, I mean, I just think this is a quality movie. And it should get a bunch of Oscars. It really should. For performances, definitely. It's got a great look, too. Great production value here. It feels like you're really there in that time period at this part of the world. You know, it's, yeah. I mean, it's just good. Just quality movie. Is it the best movie I ever saw? No. No, I don't think so. Maybe if I watched it again, I'd notice some subtext I may be glossing over here. But I think most of the decisions made in this movie are very deliberate. Very deliberate. You know, and it builds upon what happens. And, you know, you just have a stellar cast here. And it just goes to show you, when you have a stellar cast and a good director, you know, and to me, the best kind of direction is invisible directing. Like, you don't see the direction in this like you do in some movies. You're not seeing a bunch of fancy shots for no reason. This is just shot very kind of bare bones. There's a lot of movement in the shots, especially when they're in the middle of town and there's boats and people walking around. It feels like a real place, you know? Beautiful countryside. Um, you know, great scene. The animals are great too. Here he is threatening. I'm not quite sure how they did the prosthetics for the first finger. I don't think Brendan Gleeson is actually missing fingers. The second one would be the easier of the two. But my biggest criticism, I guess, is of Brendan Gleeson's character. Oh, and the priest. I forgot about the priest. The priest is a pretty cool character too, for what little he's in on it. So it really felt a lot like a play. This scene was very interesting too. Just because by this point, Brendan Gleeson has made it clear, do not talk to me, do not have contact with me. And Brendan Gleeson helps him after he's punched out by the cop, and helps him on his wagon, gets him up there, and drives him to the crossroads where, on one road he goes to his house, and the other road Colin Farrell goes back to his farm. And Colin Farrell just breaks down because he doesn't know what to do. And if I had to, another name for this movie could be Who's the A-Hole? And I would say it's Brendan Gleeson. Yeah, I think Brendan Gleeson makes the selfish choice. He's also not very clear on the rules of his ridiculous game of cutting off his own damn fingers. And, Colin Farrell is kind of trying to be, reasonable about it. At some points, he's kind of trying to not, he kind of doesn't get the message, but at the same time, he doesn't want to see his friend cut off his fingers. I think Brendan Gleeson could have given him a little leeway in that area. I think it's insane what he does. Absolutely insane. I think he's mentally ill, quite frankly, his character. But, in the end, I'm not sure where the characters end up. It's kind of like by the end of the movie, because Brendan Gleeson's character has put Colin Farrell through the ringer, he's kind of lost his status. In the beginning of the movie, Brendan Gleeson has the higher status, but I think by the end of the movie, Colin Farrell has the status because he's been so essed upon. He's suffered so much in this movie, but in the end, he sees it through, and then he says, F you, Brendan Gleeson, when he burns down his house. And it's just so crazy that he's in it in the beginning, and then later he escapes. The key is the chair, of course. When I saw that chair, I realized, oh, okay, he threw the chair out the window, and that's how he got out of his burning house. So yeah, I would I see this movie again? Nah, I rarely watch movies twice. I don't think it was that good. A movie has to be like my all-time favorite for me to watch a second time. I almost never watch movies twice. I can count on the fingers of one hand movies I've seen more than once voluntarily. Animal House, The Blues Brothers. What else? Maybe one or two others. Stuff like old Star Wars. That wasn't totally conscious. It was just kind of on. Would I see this again? I don't know. It was pretty good. Oscar worthy. If I was dating someone and I started talking about the movie, I'd sit through it again. If I had reason to see it again, I'd sit through it again. I wouldn't go out of my way to watch it again. But I think it's pretty good, and I think it's pretty illustrative screenwriters of, again, low stakes. There are low stakes here, for the most part. I mean, the shears, cutting off your own fingers thing, that's kind of high stakes for Brendan Gleeson, but mostly everything else is low. I think they probably could have done something different other than cutting off his own fingers, but they did work it in well. And again, I feel like it's a lot like a play. Maybe it was. I don't think so. Yeah, his name's... I can't even say it. Podrick is Colin Farrell's character, and Colm is Brendan Gleeson. Tough Irish names, but they're both Irish, so doing an Irish accent wasn't any big deal to either of these two. But Siobhan, wow, that's how you say that name. Look at how they spell Siobhan in Irish or Gaelic. Siobha with the little thing on top of it, A. They called her Siobhan. That does not look like Siobhan to me, but that's Carrie Condon, yeah. And Barry Keoghan is Dominic. Okay, yeah, he would be number 4 in the list. He's very good too. He plays just an odd, messed up kid, and I think that comes off pretty great. Yeah, so check this out if you haven't already. I think it's a good movie to to show screenwriters that you don't need a lot of bells and whistles to make things happen. You don't need to kill off every effing character and like shoot people in the face to have an exciting story. Really, this movie had me on the edge of my seat by the end of it, and I guess I have to attribute that to the cutting off of the fingers, but still felt it was a little extreme. Still felt it was a tad extreme, but yeah, it's pretty cool. I can't think of what I've seen Carrie Condon in before, and I know I have. God, she looks familiar. She reminds me of Justine on the Tri Channel, an older version. I wonder if they're related because they're both from Ireland. But yeah, check out the Banshees of Inisherin. I do recommend it. It's a fairly moderately strong recommendation. I wouldn't put it on the top of the list, but I think it's worth saying. Definitely an indie film. I think that's how you can pitch it to people who maybe, again, might be like, oh, this is a little weird. And that's it for me, Tony D, and Little Joan. Check us out on Odysee, Bitchute, and Rumble for our more bass takes. We'll see you in the next one.